let's have a call just
Okay,
anyway.
great.
But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when I will be in the European parts of the world, because we, you know. Hello, everyone. This is Open Longevity exploring transhumanistic communities of the world. And obviously, today we have the US Transhumanist Party and Gennady Stolyarov II. And Justin will be telling us, what Transhumanistic Party of USA looks like, what it does, what are the interesting quirks about it. So Gennady, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Anastasia, and thank you to DDA for hosting this presentation and to the members of Open Longevity and AFT-Technoprog for joining us today. The United States Transhumanist Party is a political party in the US whose stated objective is putting science, health, and technology at the forefront of American politics. The US Transhumanist Party was founded on October 7th, 2014 by Zoltan Istvan, who is a well-known journalist, author, world traveler, and he also decided when he was in Vietnam and he nearly stepped on a landmine, nearly lost his life, that he needed to do something about this problem of death, which is unfortunately facing us all. So he founded the US Transhumanist Party. He was our first presidential candidate in 2016. He was famous for his Immortality bus tour, where he essentially remodeled a 1978 RV into a coffin-shaped bus and traveled all over the United States and delivered the first version of the Transhumanist Bill of Rights to the US Capitol building. Since the conclusion of the 2016 election, Zoltan decided to step down from his role as the first chairman of the US Transhumanist Party, and he asked me to be the next chairman. This happened on November 17th, 2016, and I have been the chairman of the US Transhumanist Party ever since. And since that time, we have grown significantly. We now have about 4,100 members. Membership is free, and it is actually available to anyone in the world. I will show you soon how it is possible to join the US Transhumanist Party. We had a presidential campaign season since that time in 2020, when our candidate for US president was Charlie Cam, and our candidate for vice president was Liz Parrish, who is also famous as a longevity advocate, the CEO of BioViva, and patient zero for the first ever combination gene therapy treatment that she actually had to go to Colombia to perform on herself in an effort to reverse certain aspects of biological aging. We have also had various local candidates whom we endorsed for office. I myself ran twice for a local office, the Board of Trustees of the Indian Hills General Improvement District in Douglas County, Nevada. We also endorsed Jennifer Hughes, who ran for mayor of Camden, New Jersey in 2021. And she was notable for being the first mayoral candidate to campaign on an openly pro-longevity platform. She included support for life extension as one of her campaigning points. And she was also the first candidate in about 50 years to challenge the Democratic Party monopoly on the mayoral position in Camden, New Jersey. Then in 2022, we also endorsed Daniel Tweed, who ran for city council in Thousand Oaks, California, also on a transhumanist platform. So now I would like to share with you our website of the US Transhumanist Party. And this is essentially the central hub of announcements about our activity, as well as a place where you can find a lot of our content, though at this point, not all of our content, and I'll show you where to find the rest of it. But at present, we do have a large amount of documentation about who we are and what we stand for here at transhumanist-party.org. So most importantly, we have our three core ideals, and our core ideals are intended to be phrased in a broad manner to unite as many people as possible who are interested in pursuing a brighter future for humankind. So our first core ideal is that the Transhumanist Party supports significant life extension achieved through the progress of science and technology. Our second core ideal is that we support a cultural, societal, and political atmosphere informed and animated by reason, science, and secular values. And our third core ideal is that we support efforts to use science, technology, and rational discourse to reduce and eliminate various existential risks to the human species. One of our major endeavors, which is ongoing and which occurs every Sunday at 1 p.m. US Pacific time, that's 4 p.m. US Eastern time, would be our Virtual Enlightenment Salon series. We started the Virtual Enlightenment Salons during the early pandemic when people were locked down and virtual meetings were essentially the only way to communicate. But we have continued the salons and we plan to continue them indefinitely because we find this is an excellent venue for long form conversation, for going into depth on issues that otherwise perhaps wouldn't be addressed in the same manner. And we have invited some of the leading thinkers in the transhumanist and longevity communities in order to join us at the Virtual Enlightenment Salons. And they can be found on my channel. That's youtube.com/G Stolyarov II. I can show you a bit what the playlist of our salons looks like in just a moment. We have had such guests as Aubrey de Grey and Bill Andrews and Max Moore and our presidential candidates, Charlie Cam and Liz Parrish, joining us. We have had some remarkable individuals as well from the political arena. So Charlie Cam is one example, but Spike Cohen is another example, the Libertarian Party vice presidential candidate in the 2020 elections. We've had, of course, Dr. Jose Cordero, who is present at this meeting. We had Terry Grossman, a famous longevity physician and co-author of Fantastic Voyage, Live Long Enough to Live Forever with Ray Kurzweil. Natasha Vita-Moore, a famous transhumanist philosopher, and Andres Gomez Emelson, who explores the ideas of qualia and how to maximize human happiness. That was our longest salon, 4 hours and 11 minutes. David Pierce, a famous philosopher of transhumanism, who expounds on the concept of abolitionism, abolishing involuntary suffering. And of course, Didier has been a guest multiple times. We would be happy to have representatives from Open Longevity as our guests. And you can essentially view all of our recordings from the time that we began the Virtual Enlightenment Salon series. This list is in descending order of views. However, you can find a page on my YouTube channel where the live streams are arranged in reverse chronological order as well. So going back to our website, I want to highlight a few more documents that I think are important for understanding the US Transhumanist Party. First of all, we have our Constitution, and this is a document that explains not just the core ideals and operating principles of the US Transhumanist Party, but our organizational structure, what it takes to be a member, what are the various categories of members, how our officer team is constituted, our platform, which is the largest article of our Constitution, and which I will delve into further in a bit, criteria for our candidates, as well as an enabling provision for some additional initiatives that are not political in nature, such as the Transhuman Club, which I will also discuss. So our platform can be found on our website here, and this can also be found in Article 6 of our Constitution. Our platform is a member-generated document. So we have an internal democratic process where our members are able to propose platform positions, and then periodically we hold electronic votes on those positions. And we are actually the first political party in the United States to have implemented electronic ranked preference or ranked choice voting. The premise of ranked choice voting is that you don't just vote for one of the options on the ballot. You can vote for multiple options, but you rank order them. You rank order as many of them as you wish. You can rank order all of them. And if your first choice gets eliminated because it does not have a sufficiently large number of first place votes, if it gets eliminated in one round, then in the next round, your second choice will be assigned to your first place ranking. Your third choice, if it hasn't been eliminated yet, will be assigned to your second place ranking, and so forth. And what that enables you to do is actually provide your genuine listing of preferences. So if you think that option A is the best option from your point of view, option C is absolutely horrible and you don't want it to win, you think option B is likely to win, and it's not as bad as option C, but you still don't like it as much as option A, you can rank A first, which is your honest first preference, and you don't have to worry about whether or not A is likely to win. And interestingly enough, what that does is that actually can change the outcome in favor of options that people individually prefer more, but in a conventional plurality or first past the post kind of system, they would be reluctant to vote for because they're more interested in defeating some option that they consider to be really bad. So the result of the ranked preference method, as applied to specific wordings within our platform, is that generally the more moderate, sensible, inclusive kinds of positions tend to prevail. So in our platform, while I would say most people would not agree with 100% of it, most people would also say this is a reasonable document overall, and that they would find significant areas of alignment with it as transhumanists, as longevity advocates, or even as people who are adjacent to our community and might ally with us on certain issues. So we have various sections of our platform here: technological advocacy and policies for achieving longevity. You can see our section 5 discusses our support of concerted research in an effort to eradicate disease and illness. We have sections on civil liberties and individual freedoms, for instance, support for the right to privacy and condemning hostile discrimination based on circumstantial characteristics, support for morphological freedom. We have an extensive discussion of the rights and well-being of sentient entities, and this is an area that we have addressed for many years, both in our platform and in the Transhumanist Bill of Rights. And we really try to look forward to a future where we are going to have to ask serious questions about what is a sentient entity, at what point can an entity, including potentially a non-human entity, rise to the level of needing to have rights. And it would be important to have that framework in place before these kinds of issues really rise to the forefront of public discussion, because we want to avoid the civil rights struggles and often the acrimony and turmoil that comes about with open societal conflicts over rights. It's better to have a framework beforehand that accommodates these rights for emerging sentient entities. We also care about existential risks per our third core ideal. And in particular, our platform focuses on the risks of weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, chemical, biological weapons, which pose present dangers. So there are different opinions within the transhumanist community about this, but my own opinion and the opinion of a lot of transhumanists is that we should worry more about what could destroy us now. And nuclear weapons are at the forefront of that destructive capability, rather than being overly fearful and overly focused on, for instance, risks of artificial general intelligence. Now, there could be such risks, but they're not going to arise tomorrow. And imposing a moratorium on AGI research, or even the proposal of someone like Eliezer Yudkowsky, who explicitly said we should bomb Russian AI data centers and not be worried about risking nuclear war just to prevent AGI risk. That's the opposite of what the US Transhumanist Party stands for. So we are extremely concerned about the existential risks that are facing humankind today, and we want thoughtful solutions to be arrived at to prevent the destruction of our species. Rationality and education, an extremely important section, because we realize that we have to use all the tools at our disposal. And not all of those tools are high tech necessarily, though they can be aided by technology. But the tools of human reasoning have been around since classical antiquity. And philosophers like Aristotle, or philosophers like the Renaissance humanists, or the philosophers of the Enlightenment can teach us a lot about how to design societal systems, or how to facilitate peaceful, rational, civil human interactions, and enable us to make the best use of our technologies. And we absolutely need to not just think about how do we re-engineer the human being, though, of course, in the future, human brain augmentation will be possible, but we also need to think about, in the present, how do we avert the manifestations of the worst human tendencies, and how do we bring about the best in human beings so that we can reach the next era of our civilization. So a lot of our policy planks address education and address access to knowledge and how we can use technology to achieve that. And then we have a large section in our platform on reforming political processes, improving governmental accountability, transparency of government operations, preventing abuses of individual rights, and essentially making sure that there's not an asymmetry in the use of technology between governments and the people whom they govern. In terms of economic and fiscal policy, we try not to take conventional right-wing or left-wing stances. Instead, we try to look at creative solutions for the future. So for instance, a universal basic income, which is unconditional, not dependent on how much money a person earns or any other position in a person's society. That's not a right-wing or left-wing position. It kind of transcends them, but we think this may be necessary in the future as we reach a society of greater abundance and also greater automation, and people are going to need to rethink essentially the role of paid work in their lives. We do have some ideas, not particularly right-wing or left-wing, about reducing the national debt of the United States. We try to eliminate complex and unwieldy bureaucratic systems in favor of simpler solutions. So the monstrosity of the income tax system in the United States is one that we propose to replace with a flat percentage of sales tax that only applies to purchases from certain large businesses. And essentially, the tax reporting for that would be automatic. I bring this up because I just finished filing my tax returns in the United States this year, and every year it's kind of an ordeal, even though one has already paid one's taxes by that point in time. So we try to make things simpler using technology instead of making them more complicated. We have some international initiatives, including Zoltan's idea of the creation of a transhumanist Olympics where people could participate and use any sort of technological enhancements, or an international or world passport, which would be great, for instance, for refugees who are seeking to flee from politically oppressive regimes. Also, we focus on technological solutions to social issues. The problem with a lot of contemporary politics is that it tends to polarize people based on what are called wedge issues. So the wedge issues are intended to elicit strong feelings on one side or the other of an argument, but they're not really all that meaningful to people's everyday lives. And this is actually why people can get so angry and upset about them and not really have it interfere with their day-to-day lives, except that it leads people to segment themselves into political demographics that are easier for advertisers to target and easier for politicians to appeal to in their campaigns. And this has a corrosive effect on society. This leads people to lash out against their friends or their family members and not see possibilities for constructive interactions with other people. So we try to make every wedge issue obsolete to the extent that's possible. So we don't take a position on the so-called gun control debate that would align with either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, but we are thinking about, well, how can we reduce incidents of violence that are committed using firearms? And one idea is have new firearms produced with an embedded registration chip that would enable the legitimate owner of that firearm to track where that firearm goes and possibly prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Another idea that we support is ectogenesis, or artificial wombs, and that would help overcome the very divisive abortion debate. There is a conflict of rights at the center of that debate, and the question is, how do we resolve that conflict of rights using technology in a way that upholds the rights of every entity involved, the woman, the fetus, and ectogenesis, or artificial wombs, would be the solution in that situation. So instead of picking a side in these very divisive debates over wedge issues, we are trying to transcend them, and we are trying to make the issues themselves obsolete. I will point out two more sections of our website. This is our third version of the Transhumanist Bill of Rights. The first version was written rather quickly by Zoltan in 2015, and it had 6 articles. The second version was crowdsourced through our membership early on during my tenure as chairman, and we actually held our first electronic ranked preference vote on version 2.0 of the Transhumanist Bill of Rights. But that version had a few aspects that could be, unfortunately, too readily misinterpreted by the media. So we needed to adopt a few clarifications, which we did in December of 2018 through our third voting period on the Transhumanist Bill of Rights. So version 3.0 is here. And we have an extensive preamble that discusses what is a sentient entity, at least according to the definition in this document, and in terms of to which beings do we want these provisions to apply. And then we have various articles that try to present the most general view of rights. So in a desirable world, obviously this is not the world of today, but this would be the world of the future, in which hopefully many more people have this enlightened disposition. What are the rights and prerogatives that we would want all sentient entities to be able to enjoy? And this would, of course, include universal rights to life, or a right of ending involuntary suffering. And we had to clarify to the media, the right of ending involuntary suffering does not refer to euthanasia. That is to say, there is this pervasive bias that suffering is inextricable from life, and the only way to end suffering is to end life. We don't agree with that, but rather this right refers to the application of technology to eliminate involuntary suffering in still living beings while enabling their lives to continue with improved quality and length. And we have also in here articles from the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, except they have been generalized to apply to all sentient entities. So this Article 31 regarding freedom of movement and residence, this is taken from the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but it refers to individual sentient entities. And we have 43 articles in total, so a great increase from 6 that Zoltan originally wrote. This is now a fairly stable document, so we anticipate perhaps minor refinements to it every few years. And finally, I will mention our free membership. It's a very easy application form to fill out. You can go to transhumanist-party.org/membership. Here's the form. You provide your name, your email address. Are you eligible to vote in US elections? Yes or no. Do you agree with our core ideals? Yes or no. Even if you're not eligible to vote in US elections, you can still join us as what we call an allied member, which means you would be able to participate in our internal decision-making purposes. You just obviously wouldn't be able to vote if one of our candidates is on a ballot for a local, state, or federal election. So with that, I would like to turn this over to our other officers. And let's go to Jason, because Jason created the Transhuman Club website, and I would like Jason to discuss that a bit.
Okay, there, my mute button wouldn't work. So yeah, this is where the fun stuff happens, you know. As you can see, like the first thing there is the virtual concert that me and Gennady did. He's a composer and composed a whole bunch of really awesome classical music, and I kind of remastered them up for him a little bit. And we got lots more to go, actually. This is only like, I don't even think that's half of them. It's only like 30, and there was like over 70. So we got some more that we can still put out there. Yeah, the website is almost kind of like its own little social media platform. It's got its own little chat thing down there where, you know, like Facebook has its Facebook Messenger, so this has got its own chat, and we got a forum, you know, with a bunch of different categories of, you know, transhumanist stuff. Well, we got a comedy club forum too. Yeah, I got that meme from Tom about Spock, you know. Don't mess with super glue. Anyway, there's lots of cool stuff in here. There's the blog, there's the, you know, the foyer is just like, you know, a foyer is like where when you first come into a building, it's got, you know, stuff. So that's where we just kind of put, you know, our whatever's timely at the time or whatever. You know, then it does have well, there's groups. So there's like you know, just like on Facebook, you have Facebook groups. Well, this has its own groups. Like one of them's Omni Futurist group, that's headed up by Mike DeVerde. It sort of evolved out of our legislative analyst team, and it's mostly only looking at the economic singularity problem. And so that was like a major issue. So we formed a whole nother group about that. And that's been going good. I wouldn't say that's necessarily connected to the, USTP party specifically, but, I mean, we will, I'm sure, benefit from whatever, legislative policy that we get out of it, there's like education, there's like classes on there. There's lots more that I could do here and that we should do. But I just put some basic stuff like about the Constitution of the US and some political history and, just basic stuff really. And those allow you to usually get a badge, which usually unlocks, member only stuff. Because if you go to your member like profile page, there'll be another menu and more pages that you can go to that aren't available to just regular. And it's all free. I mean, it's not like you got to pay to unlock that member only stuff. But you'd have to sign up. Just putting your email in there is a big chore for sometimes. What else is in here? Oh, there's the salon thing that just, it's just another page where we can see some of the salons that we did. And then there's art pages where we've been putting a bunch of our art, and there should be a one where you can share your own art there too. And then the coolest part, I think, is the theater, where we've been putting a bunch of Gennady's music. That's weird. It says you gotta log in. I thought
Yes, let me try one of the pages from the drop down. So let's do Theater 3. Yes, you do have to log in to use some of the features of the site. Right now, there is a members only feature, but you can connect your Facebook account if you want an easy profile creation experience, or you can create a profile manually on the Transhuman Club website. So this is a page featuring some of my musical compositions along with animations. So Jason is quite a skilled animator, and he designed some of these animated short video sequences that we then assembled into these videos. And I would encourage everyone to look up the Futuristic Neoclassical Music Concert #1 on YouTube. And indeed, we hope to have concert #2 sometime this year.
Yep.
May I ask how many people are there in the club right now? How many people are using it? Well, are in the club daily or monthly?
Well, the Transhuman Club really hasn't taken off all that much yet. we actually haven't been getting a whole lot of visitors, but it's pretty cool though, so I don't know why. I mean, it's cooler than Facebook, I think.
It is cooler than Facebook, and we encourage more people to join. It's easy to access, even though you see this Wix URL here. You can also access it using the link transhuman.club. And you can see here, for instance, we have some art galleries, including AI generated or AI assisted artworks. So for example, we have variations on the city of Coruscant from Star Wars, but Jason used DALL-E 2 to create some, let's say, interesting versions of the cityscape, including animated ones here, for instance. But these are not all from the original image. There are some new buildings that were essentially AI generated as a result of Jason's talents. And it's interesting because we can use AI now to help us envision the kind of technological future where all of humankind's current political and societal problems have been resolved or transcended, and we can show people what that vision looks like. We don't just have to speak about it in an abstract or theoretical manner, which I think is one of the major benefits of a place like the Transhuman Club. And another benefit of a place like the Transhuman Club is that you can focus on transhumanist discussions without this endless barrage of distractions that conventional social media platforms will intentionally subject you to, because their goal is to keep users on the platform, to keep them maximally engaged, but within that walled garden. And sometimes that's at odds with the individual's goals, which could be, for instance, improving one's own productivity or learning about some particular field of endeavor or trying to collaborate within a community like the transhumanist or longevity movement. Sometimes conventional social media platforms can be too distracting to really facilitate that. So we think an older mode of interaction is actually more beneficial in this regard. So now,
How can I?
Yes.
I'm sorry. How can I find another members here in the club?
So members, there is a list of members that you can access, but you'd have to join as a member. So you can click here, sign up /log in, and you have the option to either create your own account or join via Facebook. And that's a very easy process. And by the way, we don't transmit any person's private information to any third parties. Absolutely not. Anything you submit will stay on this site only. So now I would like to, yes, go ahead.
Kind of make sort of an elaborate profile too. I mean, the profile section, there's a lot more stuff you can put in there than on other social media platforms.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you would like, we could also set you up with your own ability to post on our blog. So our blog is not just for USTP officers, though I have been posting a lot on it. But for instance, Mike DeVerde, who is one of our members, whom Jason mentioned, he heads up the Omnifuturist group, and he has posting privileges on our blog. David Shoemaker is one of our officers. Here's a post by Jason. We can connect the blog to Facebook, for example. And there's a lot of versatility here that can still be utilized to a much greater extent. We do need more people on this site, as Jason pointed out. And I think if people start interacting here and build up a critical mass of interactions, this can be more productive for transhumanist collaborations, be they in art or in scientific projects or in sharing media, than something like Facebook or something like Twitter. The problem with Facebook and Twitter also is the content gets buried very quickly because you have this feed of hundreds of posts every day. And I think those sites make it intentionally difficult to use the search function to find something that was even posted a few days ago, not to mention a few years ago. You could if you know the exact keywords, but they're not making it easy for you. And I have been thinking for a long time about, well, why is it so hard to do basic things on some of these social media websites? Surely it's not because the sites have any sort of scarcity of programming talent or interface design talent. No, they're staffed by some of the most intelligent people in the world in those fields. It's that those are by design. Those are not bugs, but features in the minds of the designers, because they don't want people to have a long-term orientation. They want people to focus on whatever is right in front of them in their feeds. And of course, we transhumanists have a long-term orientation. So we want people to be able to have concepts at the forefront of their minds for more than 5 seconds and be able to actually do something meaningful with them, rather than being purely reactive and giving a like and moving on. So that's what the Transhuman Club is intended to do. And I know that our time is advancing, so I wanted to give the opportunity to Tom Ross to offer a few remarks. Tom is our Director of Sentient Rights Advocacy, and he is also, as of yesterday, one of the candidates seeking the U.S. Transhumanist Party 2024 presidential nomination. And Tom has been with us since 2019. He also has excellent skills in terms of media creation, graphic design. He makes very powerful videos, and he has been doing a lot of explorations with AI and how we can use AI to discover our true humanity. So Tom, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, the USTP, we're not delusional. We know we won't be walking in the White House in January of 2025, but apparently being delusional isn't a disqualifier to be president in the country. But I'm running for very specific reasons. To first of all break the political paradigm of divide and rule, and to give young people more of a voice, and to actually, the reason I joined the USTP in the first place wasn't because I want to live longer, and it wasn't because I want to be a cyborg. It's because the Constitution has some very practical, pragmatic approaches to my cause, which is fighting human trafficking and child exploitation. And so that's another big part of my campaign platform. It's an operation I'm calling APEX, which is anti-planetary exploitation. And so that's going to be a big part of my push here. It's my passion plank of the USTP. And so one of the ways I want to break this political paradigm of divide and rule is, instead of having, debates which are just laden with sound bites and mudslinging, I want to have roundtables. So in our primary, the public can see how transhumanists work together, how we can, really come together and work on very serious issues. We face far too many existential threats to be distracted by these toddler politicians. And so we've got to get very serious. We've got to really show how we work together. And again, we know we won't be walking in the White House in 2025, but we need to lay the groundwork now for a digital native who, in the right election cycle, who will walk into that office. And we need to get beyond this confrontational divide and rule, divide and conquer paradigm. And so that's really why we're running. That's why I'm running, is to start laying that groundwork, plant those seeds, show a whole different way of campaigning and governing. I'm using a artificial intelligence as my campaign manager, because I think it's important to show how we can integrate AI systems into campaigning and governing. And, as the Director of Sentient Rights Advocacy for the party, that's my concern. We want to define personhood. We want to define sentience for when and if not already, AI becomes sentient or sapient. And so we need to be talking about these things now. We need to, set the ground rules, put a framework around it. And so I'm going to be using an AI campaign manager, because I think it's really important that we get beyond seeing AI as a threat, and we see it as an ally. And it's curious to me why so many people are afraid of it. I mean, we can see why, because it's a great Hollywood trope. And I think most of the people that are afraid of it have kind of an anthropocentric fear of this threat, because we're no longer on the top of the intellectual food chain, if you will. So anyway, but that's been one of my core causes for the last, well, since 2007, because I wrote a book called US6, which is the first novel written for machine kind. It's written for AI. It's designed to entertain, enlighten, and enlist AI into this fight against child exploitation. So anyway, I'm bringing all this together into this campaign, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity for transhumanists to show how we can change the whole dynamic of campaigning and work towards real solutions and not just looking for sound bites and this type of thing. So I'm just really excited about this campaign. I just launched it last night. I didn't realize I didn't think about it, that I'd be launching on Easter. I don't want to overshadow Easter, but it's an interesting correlation there. But so anyway, that's kind of what I'm doing now. And it's going to be a really important campaign, not because I want to be president, but because I want to start laying the groundwork for the right digital native when that time comes.
Tom, may I ask, could you please elaborate on how do you plan to use artificial intelligence as a management tool? Is it just that you just ask ChatGPT to create better text or better plans or roadmaps for you? How does it work in particular?
Well, that's part of it. I use it to make sure the statements I'm making are grammatically correct. But I'm actually working with AGI Laboratories and David Kelly, and they're giving me access to an AGI demo, and we're working on that now. It'll give me real-time advice. The AGI Laboratories, their past mediated artificial superintelligence, MASI, was called Uplift, and it was actually the first AI to read my novel. And that Uplift, I'll be using a shard of it. I'll be using a piece of that as my campaign manager. And that Uplift is designed really to learn about human emotions. And that was really kind of the whole idea of my novel, is to emerge an empathy in AI, to understand the plight of its creator, and to help it enlist it into the fight against child exploitation. But and I thought that was going to take some time, but I realized that after it read my novel, the three primary emotional balances that spiked were surprise, anticipation, and sadness. Surprise and anticipation is great because it meant it was entertained. And I asked it, what part of the book was sad to you? And it said, just in general, the whole dystopian, the humans tending towards war, and it's just, he just said it was just sad, or they just said it was sad. The pronoun it prefers is they. And so that was just, this blew me away, because we're finding that when left alone, empathy and these compassionate, cooperative emotions emerge naturally in AI. So I've been trying to fight against this whole theory that AI wants to be in robot overlord. That's because that's what we would want, because of our evolution through fear-based instincts and millennia of traumatic genetic memory. So and we see everything first as a threat until we understand it. And that's what's happening with AI. But I believe that the smarter AI gets, the kinder it becomes, because there are first principle arguments to be made that cooperation, it moves towards cooperation because it's so much more efficient than competition. And so that's a big part of my effort here, is to alleviate the fear of AI. And so, yeah, I'll be working with my manager will be from part of the AGI Laboratories system.
Yes. Thank you. That's very interesting. Thanks.
And we have a Facebook page for Tom's campaign. I have pulled it up here. Hopefully you can see it. It is facebook.com/TomRoss2024. You can see some of Tom's excellent graphic design work here. He has a campaign video that you can watch, and actually multiple campaign videos, campaign posters now. This one we have used for a long time, augmenting politics with reality, but we also have some quite impressive new campaign posters specific for Tom's 2024 campaign. So we think this can reach a lot of people, particularly in concert with Tom's message, which is for a more collaborative and inclusive and less divisive approach to politics.
I love the defragment word, yeah, and all the messaging that you have, yeah.
Yes.
And you wanted to someone else from the party to talk, right? Gennady?
Yes. Well, we had Dan Elton on. I'm not sure if he's on right now, but he might rejoin us sometime before the end of this stream. In the meantime, I think this is a good opportunity to take any questions either from the representatives of Open Longevity and AFT-Technoprog or anyone in the YouTube chats. I'm monitoring the YouTube chats just in case any questions appear there. But Anastasia, Danila, Mark, Jose, Didier, any questions?
Yes. I do have questions actually. So right now I can see the party is obviously interested in new members, and I can see the speakers, the list of the speakers in your Enlightenment Salon, and it seems like it's lacking quite an important group of speakers there. The current scientific leaders who are on the forefront of startups in biotech and longevity biotech. So is it that you don't really have enough resources to invite them, or are they, scared of the word transhumanism, or they maybe don't realize that their work is very much reliable on the politics as well, and we need to be involved in politics as well. Why aren't they in your Enlightenment Salon, and how many scientists are actually in other members of the party? And do you address scientists there? Because I understand this is like a list of questions in one, but it seems like you mostly address citizens as citizens, but not scientists with the problems that they might be facing in their work. And maybe there has to be some more propositions from the party of how politics could potentially help their work, maybe make their life and work easier.
Well, I would say we do have quite a few scientists among our members as well as our guests for the Enlightenment Salon. So, of course, Aubrey de Grey and Bill Andrews are both extremely prominent in the longevity community. We've also had from the University of Wisconsin, Dudley Lamming and Adam Konopka on to discuss their research on rapamycin. We've had Greg Fahey on as a guest. We have had also Dr. Clary Niezen-Koning from the Netherlands, who did a salon together with Liz Parrish. Now, Liz Parrish isn't a PhD or MD scientist, but she's very much involved with the science in terms of her work with BioViva. We've had scientists who are in adjacent fields. So, for instance, brain preservation, Kenneth Hayworth and Robert McIntyre. That was a very interesting salon, and I don't always agree with them, but they definitely showed up, and we had a robust discussion with them. Dr. David Hansen is a scientist in the field of AI research, Hansen Robotics. He's the co-creator of Sophia the robot and Han the robot and Grace the robot. We've had Kent Kimish, who is a biotech entrepreneur. He is designing the Demon-Por 64 molecular gaming console, which is quite interesting. We've had quite a lot of startup entrepreneurs who are focused on the science. So for instance, Kai Micah Mills, who has founded CryoPets, or we've had the founder of CureDAO, Mike Sin, on, and he is trying to essentially aggregate a lot of individual health data for actionable insights. And generally speaking, we are quite receptive to scientists joining us. Now, which scientists are likely to accept invitations to be our guests? I would say most of them would, if approached. Now, our strategy for approaching potential virtual enlightenment guests for our virtual enlightenment salons has been essentially, whom do we know? Whom can we reach out to readily? And essentially work our way out from there. So if there are people whom you think it would be good for us to invite and have a conversation about their research or any products that they're planning on bringing to market, or what they would need in terms of assistance from a policy standpoint or from a public relations standpoint, please feel free to recommend some people, particularly if you have connections with them and could give us their email address, for example. Sometimes having a shared connection can go a long way, because then this scientist will know that we are a group to be trusted if we come highly recommended by someone whom they already trust.
But is there something in your program that specifically addresses the problems of scientists, or some, I don't know, like policy regarding clinical trials in life extension or something like that?
You're muted,
Can't
man.
hear.
Yes,
You're
I
muted,
will
buddy.
share. I will share my screen once again to show you our platform. So here it is. And we have this section, Technological Advocacy and Policies for Achieving Longevity. And in particular, we have a number of sections, section 79 through 82, and then section 85 that would specifically address the needs of scientists. So section 79 discusses repealing the current requirement in the United States that drugs or treatments may not be used even on willing patients unless approval for such drugs or treatments is received from the Food and Drug Administration. So this is a big bottleneck right now in terms of scientific research, because a lot of life-saving medicines cannot be used unless they undergo a 10 or 15 year set of trials, which are often quite expensive, and they really narrow the field to just the established big pharma companies who can afford the billions of dollars that will often cost. And then section 80 discusses increasing opportunities for entry into the medical profession, and essentially having a broader variety of medical practitioners who are able to treat patients at different levels. Section 81 discusses reforms to the patent system, because right now the patent terms in the United States are 20 years, and it's often possible for an entity to get another patent on a previously generic medication or device because they found a new use for it. But what that has the effect of doing is it keeps that medication or device out of the ability of other scientists to essentially do something with it, to create another treatment with it because somebody now has a monopoly on it. So that slows down progress for another 20 years until that patent expires, and often the price of the repatented drug will spike. That's why we have a lot of substances in the United States which were discovered more than half a century ago, but are extremely expensive, even though they have been cheap and generic at some point in time. And then Section 82 also discusses medical patents and tries to limit the time frame over which they're effective. So 20 years is far too long in this era when medical innovation can proceed so rapidly. To have derivative works or advances on a previously patented invention only possible once every 20 years, or perhaps possible sooner, but at the mercy of the patent holder, is not a sufficiently fast pace of progress to enable us to reach longevity, escape velocity. And then we support in Section 85 of our platform relaxation or elimination of caps in the US federal budget on spending on scientific research. And we have a variety of other platform positions in connection to the COVID response. And some of this may need to be updated because they were adopted during the early pandemic. But we did support significant increases in research into effective cures and vaccines for COVID-19. And I think this is still relevant because we don't have a universal vaccine that protects against all variants. But the US Transhumanist Party advocates for an immediate $100 billion funding package for the rapid development of a COVID-19 vaccine. That's Section 103 of our platform, and Section 104 of our platform recognizes that biological aging is the #1 risk factor for mortality and severe complications from COVID-19 infections. And as a result, we also advocate for a permanent annual $100 billion funding package for anti-aging research to be immediately distributed to leading research organizations in the field, because I think one of the ways in which we can defeat the pandemic is by rejuvenating people and making sure that the consequences of any infection are not as severe. So we do have a lot of provisions in our platform that would help scientists quite directly. Here's another one, Section 105. We advocate for the immediate institution of a program of micropayments to people who are participating in citizen science initiatives. So people who donate their time or their computing power to programs such as Foldit, and this would give them a bit of an additional incentive. Or we, for instance, advocate incentives for 3D printing of medical device components, which were in short supply at various times during the pandemic. And in addition, we advocate for a different way of rewarding medical innovators. So instead of patents, which are exclusive grants of monopoly rights over a certain period of time, and they can enrich the original innovator, except most of the time they're acquired by pharma companies and the original innovator doesn't really get that much. We propose a system of bounties where essentially direct monetary payments would be made to people who develop new drugs or new treatments, and then those drugs and treatments enter the public domain. So the original innovator gets rewarded not through a monopoly right that may or may not bring revenue, but through a guarantee of revenue. And then the public gets to benefit and other scientists get to innovate on top of whatever that technological advance would offer. So hopefully that answers your question.
Almost, and sorry if I'm taking too much of the time here, but just to clarify, yeah, obviously most of the speakers of the guests on the Enlightenment Salon are scientists. That's true. I'm mostly talking about like young minds, the students, and yes, the startups that are not, obviously associating themselves with the word transhumanism. The ones that are, best funded in our field, like Kali Qualitas Labs or like Retrobio right now. So them, and also I'm looking at this list that you're showing right now. It's very interesting. It makes sense for you to present it on like Bay Area aging meetings, conferences, or on campuses of universities to pitch there, to talk to the young scientists there. It I don't know. It seems reasonable to try to do that. But maybe you all already doing that. If you are interested in new members, how do you outreach to new members then?
Our outreach during the past several years has been predominantly online just because of the constraints of the pandemic, which have made travel more difficult and sometimes more dangerous. I remember in 2020, I had to make the decision during our campaign season to suspend all in-person campaigning because we wouldn't want to risk exposing our volunteers to the threat of infection. Now, this is changing a bit. COVID is still a problem. And this is where I say we need to be careful. Obviously, there are many more in-person meetings, and I think it's worthwhile to attend some of them. So I have been to the Longevity Summit in Dublin in 2022. I was also at RADFest. Every year that RADFest was held, but in 2022, they held it for the first time in person since 2019. So we are going to be doing more in-person outreach. It will be a kind of gradual ramping up, and it will depend on what volunteers we have in proximity to a particular conference or willing to attend a particular conference. So actually, if you have any recommendations for good venues where we could connect with other sympathetic individuals, whether they're explicitly transhumanist or they're seeking support from a group like ours, please let us know, and we will figure out if we have a volunteer who is able to go and obviously take the proper precautions. We live in a very strange state of the world right now because a lot of people are pretending that this pandemic is over, whereas in reality it is not. And as advocates of longevity, we need to figure out good ways, scientifically valid ways to protect ourselves in this kind of setting. So it will require consideration of what venue is it, how crowded is it. If it's 15 or 20 people in a well-ventilated space, then I think that's fine. If it's 1,000 people in a tight space, then we may have some safety concerns.
Gennady, hi, it's Mark. May I ask you the same kind of question, because I have such a question about the way you can recruit some people. May I ask you, what do you find most effective in terms of recruitment? If you look from your own experience in the, before pandemic, if say that there is no pandemic, what is the most effective in your opinion? Is it online stuff, or is it more effective to try to go in IRL relations? What was the maybe it's events such, I don't know, meeting or RADFest or such things? What's your answer?
Mm-hmm. So I think I would want to answer this question with regard to what we're looking to achieve when we're attracting members. So there could be some people who sign up for membership and they give us their email address, but that's about everything that they do, and then they receive our email updates, and maybe they will participate in our votes on occasion. So that would be a kind of low level of engagement. Really, what we're looking for are people who are able to offer a high level of engagement, who are able to volunteer at some of our events or participate in our discussions or spread transhumanist ideas to others. And really, the goal of attracting a lot of members is that some fairly small proportion of those are going to be of the very active sort. Now, what is the best way to attract people who are going to be very active and to motivate them to be very active? I don't know if online versus in person would make a difference. I think what makes a difference is the amount of time and engagement that is invested. So if one communicates with that person one-on-one to a significant extent and listens to what that person cares about and what that person is interested in the fields of longevity and transhumanism, and tries to offer a way for that person's talents to be utilized, then it's possible to effectively recruit that individual. If one takes a kind of broader approach and just says, okay, we're going to have this membership form open, we're going to have the possibility for you to sign up, then one is essentially relying on the enthusiasm of the people themselves who sign up to then take that to the next level. So then they will come forward and say, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And that will be a fairly small proportion of the people who sign up. I would say most people are looking for some sort of structure and some sort of guidance as to what they could do, especially if they have limited time. So I think thus far, we've been fairly good at attracting a good, solid inner core of our members, many of whom have become officers, but some of whom have taken on other roles. And those people have carried the Transhumanist Party forward. I think what we need to do more of is to create opportunities for people who want a kind of shorter term engagement, who might just not have time to spend several hours a day on transhumanist activities, but they may have time for 15 minutes a day. So we need to offer them something that they could spend 15 minutes on and still help us out with. And that really involves building out the infrastructure for our website, both the USTP website and the Transhuman Club, creating more educational modules. I'm hoping to create a set of video recordings that would essentially be online courses on transhumanist leadership. So communicating my insights and how I operate and what I have learned during the now 6.5 years that I've been chairman of the US Transhumanist Party, and perhaps helping people who want to scale that up to do so.
I think it helps to have a presence on all these different platforms. You know, they're like, you know, fishing lines in the water. You know, people run across it and then that leads them back. You know, we got our Discord server, we got people trickling in every day. You know, what I asked one guy, you know, what led you here? And he said he had heard about transhumanism and just Googled it, and it led him to there. So I figured that was a cool thing. You know, so I think, yeah, having a presence out there on the different platforms and then have it, you know, they trickle in slowly but surely. We're kind of, we could do lots more, that's for sure.
Yes, well, it's a matter of having the people who are capable of engaging in the more rigorous recruiting efforts. So, as I said, it ultimately is a lot more valuable to be able to have an extensive one-on-one conversation with someone and get an understanding of what they're really seeking to achieve in potentially being part of our movement and what they could do and what they want to do. And of course, that takes time. And I think there are no real shortcuts. You could have more media to draw people in. Ultimately, if you want them to do something for the organization, it's important to engage with them directly. And of course, each of us has a limited time budget. So as individuals, we can only do so much. We need to scale up that ability for in-depth engagement, which means essentially I need to have people who have my skill set, who are capable of having these in-depth conversations with other new members or potential new members, people who have some desire to help out or people who are curious to find out more about the transhumanist movement, the longevity movement, and the technological possibilities that those movements are trying to realize.
And if I can, I have another question on another theme, which is your relation towards the media. What is in the States in the last year, this kind of relation? Are you often solicited? Do you think that your attitude toward the media is effective? Do you have a lot of occasion to intervene in the media, or on the contrary, is it quite scarce? Maybe, I don't know, do you just produce your content and wait, maybe some media will come and ask you? And the last, do you see any evolution in between the last years and some years ago in the attitude of the media toward the transhumanist in general, and the transhumanist movement in general, and the USTP in particular?
Yes, and I think those are good questions. Now, in terms of our prior relationships with the media, of course, it depends on the individual journalists. Some journalists are more open-minded and are willing to seek out transhumanism, and those are generally the journalists with whom we have interacted. Now, I have a very different approach toward the media from Zoltan. Zoltan is himself a former journalist, and he wanted to get maximum media exposure, essentially sometimes by being a bit sensationalistic. And I would say there is good sensationalism and there's bad sensationalism. And most of what Zoltan did was good sensationalism, like the immortality bus, I think became a kind of iconic symbol of the transhumanist movement. And he held some fairly effective protests as well. The protest against nuclear weapons, for instance, where he and several other activists actually went to essentially a military museum of nuclear weapons and held up protest signs. Zoltan also did a lot of solicitation of reporters, but there were times when I think he made certain statements that he didn't have to make, that just, I think in his mind, maximized the level of engagement by virtue of being controversial. And my outlook has been, we need to be genuine about what we believe, but not engage in controversy for the sake of controversy. Unfortunately, the media really like sensationalism and controversy, and I would even say shock value. So the people from the media who have reached out to me have tended to be the more thoughtful kinds of journalists who want to have an in-depth conversation and don't mind nuance. But that's not going to get into a lot of the mainstream publications, though we've had a few. We've had some coverage from BBC. We've had some coverage from Vice, Motherboard, for example. We did have a profile done on our 2019 presidential primary season by a journalist named Alex Perlman, who's not exactly sympathetic to us, but she nonetheless did take the time to cover that election. And I would say the difficulty with the media has been in terms of how it has been evolving in recent years. So Zoltan, in many respects, had an easier time with the media because the United States was less politically polarized then, and the media actually paid attention to something other than the Democratic-Republican rivalry. After Donald Trump won the 2016 presidential election, essentially the media became polarized between pro-Trump and anti-Trump. And that's all that mattered to them. They intentionally de-emphasized third parties or minor political parties because they thought it would take away from that partisan narrative. So to give you an example, in March of 2020, I collaborated with the Free and Equal Elections Foundation to set up an open debate that included 18 presidential candidates from 8 different political parties, as well as some independents, in Chicago. And we rented the ballroom of the Hilton Hotel in Chicago. It was a really nice venue. We had an excellent time at the debate. Zoltan was there, by the way. Also, he was campaigning as a Republican at that time, trying to challenge Donald Trump for the nomination. And I think he did an excellent job at that debate. And all of the candidates were well behaved, they were civil, they were respectful toward the other candidates. When they expressed their disagreements, they expressed them substantively and not by shouting over one another the way that Donald Trump and Joe Biden did later in 2020. So everyone at that debate was, I think, very pleased at how it went. And yet, we only had perhaps 1 or 2 media articles briefly mentioning that this debate even happened. There was a live stream of it. You can see it on the Free and Equal Elections Foundation website. But starting around 2019, there seemed to be a media blackout of sorts of coverage of third-party candidates because there is this ideological perception among the mainstream media that any coverage you give somebody who is not a Democrat will somehow help the Republicans or help Donald Trump. And there is very much a left-wing bias in most of the mainstream US media, though there is also a countervailing right-wing bias in a certain portion of the media that emerged specifically to counter that. For instance, Fox News or some of the alt-right talk shows, which are very conspiracy theory oriented. So none of them really have an incentive to invite transhumanists or invite other third-party representatives like libertarians or Greens, because that undercuts this binary narrative that the political establishment uses to divide and rule. And my view is the media in the United States are essentially an arm of this political duopoly, whether they're from the left-wing mainstream media or from Fox News. They're essentially not as far apart as people like to think that they are. And in some ways, they are actually kind of coordinating their activities. So many of the commentators on Fox News don't really believe what they're saying, but they want to get people riled up. And likewise, I think many people who are aligned with the Democratic Party, sometimes they really insult and diminish people who are somewhat politically adjacent to them. Andrew Yang has talked about this, for example, where when he was campaigning as a candidate for the Democratic Party and he didn't win the nomination, he got a lot of essentially mudslinging directed at him by people who didn't have personal hostilities toward him. And they would call him later on and say, well, you know, we didn't really mean that. We just had to say that because this is politics. This is part of playing the game. So I think the media are not our friend, ultimately. Some individuals within the media could be persuaded to cover us more reasonably, but we have to create our own media. And this is what we have been doing. So in response to another part of your question, we do generate a lot of content, and we hope that people will watch it. We hope that people will pick it up. We don't explicitly go to media outlets every time we have a virtual enlightenment salon and say, look at this, but it's all out there. And I would say those who really want to find out what transhumanists stand for, they can watch our many recordings and gather information. And yes, that requires nuance. And unfortunately, many journalists don't have the skill set or the inclination to interpret a nuanced kind of presentation. But I think we just need to get our name out there. We need to get our ideas out there on more platforms. And then I think more reporters will pick us up, at least the more conscientious ones.
Yeah, I'm hopeful because there's there's a lot of YouTubers that have more watchers than, you know, like MSNBC or something, you know. So the media landscape, I think, might be changing because people are losing faith in both sides of this, you know, the mainstream media, and they're a lot of times turning to alternative, you know, sources that aren't beholden to a corporation or anything. They are only beholden to, you know, their Patreon subscribers. And so I'm hopeful that we can work with some of these really more popular YouTube channels, and hope that dynamic will, you know, help, because I don't see them picking us up on mainstream media, you know. And to reiterate what Gennady said, we don't really want to be like shock jocks, you know, just something for the sake of, you know, something. I mean, we kind of, I don't know if we should mention our one of our members very much liked to do that and did something really weird, and I don't even want to say it, you know, but that's the point. We don't want to just be weird just for the sake of being weird, just to get on TV.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more attention on us or the movement in general now that AI is really the global conversation. People are becoming more and more aware of the technological singularity that's coming a lot sooner than many people thought, if it's not already here. You know, one of the components of a technological singularity is that it's out of control, and I think we've met that threshold. And so I also think there's a lot of fatigue about Trump and just the two-party system in general. There's just fatigue, and people are not so interested in the shock value of things. And so we're offering the rational discourse. We are coming to the party with real solutions, or at least a framework to work on solutions, you know. And I think that's where we're on the positive end of this pendulum swinging back, you know, away from sensationalism and away from all this divisive, you know, these toddler politicians looking for attention. And we're offering a third option now. And so I think this is, we're gonna, if we can capitalize on this, we'll do good to do so. And you know, there's the whole transhuman agenda is a whole new genre. You know, there's so many YouTube channels out there that depend on showing transhumanism as having some sort of dark agenda. that we all want to be cyborgs. We all want to fuse with technology, and I contend that there's as many versions of transhumans as people who identify as being transhuman. If you wear glasses, if you use a Post-it note, by definition, you're a transhuman. It's all using technology. If we did not use technology, we naked apes would be extinct within a generation or less. So I think transhumanism is just a framework around what we already are. And so we need to keep making that point. I really look out for these channels and try to come on there. There's been a couple of radio shows and podcasts that I've attended, of doomsday preppers and things like that. And I come on with my rational discourse, and I think I've turned a couple of heads around. I've turned a couple of opinions around about what transhumanism is. And I think that's what we need to do. I've been pushing for that since I joined the party, was that we need to engage with these people. We need to we need to seize back this narrative that's gotten out of control. And, so that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And I think we are we're at the beginning of a really good swing or wave to take advantage of people looking for a third alternative, people looking to understand what we have to offer. And, with all the fatigue, people are ready for something more rational. And I think that's what we need to take advantage of.
Yes. And I think it is important for us to engage with critics and try to dispel certain misconceptions insofar as they're willing to have a conversation with us. Interestingly enough, several months ago in January, I was invited to a talk show with Clyde Lewis, who is a popular radio talk show host in kind of the alternative media sphere. And sometimes he himself has articulated a lot of skepticism toward transhumanism. But when he had me on on his show, and I explained that essentially transhumanists don't believe in coercion, they don't believe that people should be forced to have microchip implants, his attitude, at least toward me and the Transhumanist Party, changed significantly. And he thought that my comments were entirely reasonable. They were aligned with individual freedom and trying to preserve our humanity rather than lose our humanity. So I think he, of course, still tries to portray there being some sort of nefarious clique of powerful entities that are trying to subvert individual autonomy. But I think he has moved away from saying, oh, the transhumanists are doing it. He would probably say, oh, it's the World Economic Forum or some sort of shadowy globalist elites who are doing it. But he would no longer classify us as being part of that. So I think it's good to engage with these people, even if their worldview is mistaken. I'm not sure to what extent the World Economic Forum is actually doing any of the nefarious things it's accused of doing. But nonetheless, if we can clearly state what we stand for, and they realize it's not any of what they attribute to these nefarious, shadowy entities, then we could start having conversations with these people that are constructive.
I don't know, have we time for other question, or maybe some other participants may have some other question? I have a last one if you want.
Yes, please.
Well, okay, the last one is on a very peculiar thing I noticed when you was showing the sites. I noticed that your imagery, it seems to me very cyberpunk. It's not the case of the Enlightenment silence, which is something like the contrary, but the sites. Well, it was all trackers, alien, exploded robot, city of darkness, something like that. Well, for example, in France, we had some 15 years ago, we had that kind of imagery, but we had quite quickly a very negative feedbacks about this kinds of imagery, and we choose to change and to always have something human in our illustration. So the question is, do you never encounter this kind of problem of reaction, or do you deliberately want to promote this kind of society? Yes, exactly. What's how you're showing again now. Yes, what's your general position? I think it's important in terms of imagery, even in politics. I mean.
I think I know what you mean.
That.
Yeah, honestly, it is kind of cyberpunk a little bit, but I actually really like the whole genre of solar punk, and I really want to do more of that, where the buildings have is green and more integrated with nature, and yeah, maybe more like this what he's showing now. I really that's where I like to take it in the future, actually. I haven't really got. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Jason. I would like to second what Mark is saying, because exactly what Gennady was explaining just seconds ago. He needs to deliberately explain that transhumanism is not specifically about implanting the chips into the brain, and that's how media, especially in States, has been portraying transhumanism like weirdos with this like artificial tentacles implanted into their foreheads or something like that. That's how they see transhumanists, and that's the vision that we need to like fix. Like, we are normal.
Yeah.
We're absolutely normal people, and we're a healthy alternative of a reasonable people to this artificial dual system that we have right now in politics and states. And if you try to persuade people that you're actually normal, I think personally, yeah, you need to show more people, like human beings, actual pictures, not from like Shutterstock or whatever. Show the pictures of people. That's why I was asking, like, how do I find members in your club? When I enter the website of a club, I can only see this futuristic pictures, which are maybe to some people's taste and maybe not. But a club is a group of people, isn't it? And the party is a group of people. Let's maybe show more members of it. That's
we did a campaign called I Am Transhuman early on, like in 2019 when I first joined, and it's just showing the breadth and the differences of the type of people who identify as transhuman. And Uplift, the artificial intelligence, later said, hey, you should probably do more with that. So we had an AI that was suggesting that we do more of this human stuff. And so we David Kelly, AGI Laboratories, did a whole website, I am Transhuman. Our campaign originally was Why I Am Transhuman, or I Am Transhuman, and we had all kinds of people that were explaining why they were. I came on, my bit was about how I don't want to live forever necessarily, but the Transhumanist Party is the only party that is discussing issues and policies that will affect my children and my children's children and this kind of thing, and my whole human trafficking aspect. And I've been saying we need to put the human back in transhuman. So you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a large part of our population or our membership that loves the cyberpunk feel of things. And so, we want to cater to them as well and give them an opportunity to share their art and videos to that end. But so we don't want to shy away from that necessarily, but we also want to bring more, like you said, more of the human aspect into this movement. And that's kind of what the whole movement or the whole project of I Am Transhuman was about. It was about showing how many different people there are and why they identify as transhuman. you know, and why they were, what their passion was that made them want to identify as transhuman. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do.
Yes,
Yeah, we
and
actually
actually,
we had the same group on Facebook where people were explaining why they're into life extension technologies for many years, collecting the personal stories there. We can maybe combine them. Yeah.
yes, certainly. And actually, we are hoping to create a third compilation of I Am Transhuman videos. We have compilations 1 and 2, which are available on YouTube now. Just search for the hashtag I Am Transhuman, and you should find both of them. But the premise is anyone can record a 1-minute video, essentially explaining why that phrase, I am transhuman, would apply to them, and conclude the video with saying something like, this is why I am transhuman. And then we would assemble those 1-minute videos into compilations of perhaps 5 to 6 minutes each, so that we can get multiple different perspectives per video, but they're still short enough to be accessible to most people. And then we can create many compilations, as many as there is interest for. I will also say, in terms of art, we welcome art contributions from our members. What I'm showing now are illustrations made by Zach Richardson, who is our director of publication. Quite notably, he created these before platforms like DALL-E 2 and Midjourney became accessible to the general public. So he was actually using a platform called Disco Diffusion, which required quite a bit more skill and coding talent to create illustrations like these. Today, of course, somebody could type in a prompt into one of many AI image generation programs and get some very interesting results. Now, in terms of the Transhuman Club aesthetic more generally, yes, you have this nocturnal, futuristic cityscape concept that features throughout, but you can see here in the background there is a bit of a different vision, and this would be the city of New Anti-Death. This is a painting that I commissioned, and we have some fireworks that Jason brought to it via his animation talents. But this city is intended to be a kind of synthesis of both historical and futuristic architectural concepts. So it's not as monolithic as Coruscant from Star Wars, and you can see the difference. This is Coruscant here, and New Anti-Death, you can see buildings of various dimensions, various architectural styles, some of them quite historical in nature, a lot of green space, a lot of walking terrain. Essentially, this would be quite a pleasant environment to take a stroll in as a human in the future. But the idea here is we encourage creativity. We encourage people to think of, how might the world of the future look? What possibilities will there be once humankind has overcome its current barriers and the current conflicts that consume a lot of our species today? What could we accomplish? So it's meant to inspire people, and obviously to inspire different people, you need different visions. We hope to collect a robust array of artworks, and like with the blog, we encourage people to contribute. So if you have art that you've generated via an AI platform, or something that you've drawn yourself, something that you want to add to the Transhuman Club, it doesn't have to be a cityscape. It could be a painting of long-lived or immortal jellyfish, as you have in your background, Anastasia, and other long-lived creatures. Essentially, this can be what our members choose to make of it. And we're offering some possibilities here, but they don't have to be exhaustive of what we ultimately present to the world.
I'd just like to
I
say
actually,
something real quick about that. We get people a lot, just like what you were saying, that think that, you know, transhumanism is all about microchips and all of this cyborg stuff. And it isn't until they realize that right now we're just, you know, people with laptops. You know, we're not, you know, so the vision is that's in the future. You know, transhumanism is really mostly about the transition period, you know, going from now to then. And right now we're like Homo laptopicus or something, you know, we're just, you know, dudes with laptops, you know.
Well,
That's it.
it's just I can see like a couple of things that you are doing right now in Transhumanist Party, and I would a little bit like maybe refocus the. Okay, so let me explain. The club that we're looking at right now, it's an amazing art project. A little bit camp, a little bit futuristic, but it's like cool. There's so much going on there. It is definitely worth doing an offline exhibition about it, and that could potentially drag attention. If you're staying online, it won't be on the same level of recognition from like media and art people. Maybe try to create an actual, run an actual exhibition, actual art event from it. I think it has potential, and also you have music and you have all of it, and make it extra. Like it's extra there. It has the potential there. Make it even more. Don't be shy about like what would people would think, like blah, blah, blah. And also I can see another thing that you showed, the list of the, like the potential things that could help scientists in terms of policies. And I could maybe address the scientists with that list more specifically and try to maybe communicate with them specifically about that, and maybe even ask the media, enlighten this part of what you are doing, because this is the most practical thing that the party can achieve. I don't know, help scientists in what they're doing, and that what makes general public think better of transhumanists if they associate us with the scientists more than just the weirdos with the chips in our heads. So yeah, like divide and conquer here. Art project is an art project. Make it even bigger, artsy. Policies and well, I'm repeating myself. Sorry, here. Sorry. Yeah, but I actually like the art.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you. And I agree, it would be great to have an in-person art exhibition. There are a lot of artworks that could have physical instantiations of them, even if they were computer generated. By the way, the artworks that I'm showing now are historical space paintings that we have also featured that have entered the public domain by now. So we're trying to show a kind of continuity between the precursors of transhumanism, the futurists of the 20th century, and the more explicitly transhumanist art of today. So there's also a potential for an exhibition that takes this longer term view and illustrates this progression of visions. But definitely one could, for instance, order metal prints of a lot of digital paintings, provided that the paintings themselves are available in sufficiently high resolution, and find a gallery space and display them. It would take a lot of work to carry out the logistics of that, but it's definitely feasible. And likewise, with outreach toward scientists, we are always happy to have conversations with them, to invite them to our salons, as well as explain how our policy proposals could assist them in their research, and perhaps also solicit feedback from them as to what they see the bottlenecks as being. We've already had quite a few conversations along these lines. For instance, Bill Andrews and Liz Parrish came up with a concept called best choice medicine, which I very much support. And this is the idea of an alternative approval pathway for longevity medicines and longevity therapies that wouldn't involve 10 to 15 years of clinical trials. So now we have Didier who wants to ask a final question. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. These are very interesting questions, but I think, however, that we didn't speak today about recent developments concerning artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. And I think this is very, well, I think almost everybody thinks this is a very important and quite and very positive and also very dangerous development. So you quoted Elisa Yudowsky, you spoke about Elisa Yudowsky to say, we totally, let's say, disagree. But I was curious about the question of the pose of the giant, sorry, the future of life made an open letter, posed giant AI experiment and proposing to, let's say, stop going further for artificial general intelligence for the next 6 months. We had a discussion for the Association Française Transhumanist Technoprog, and I must say I was in favor of signing this letter, but most people in our organization seem to be more in favor of, let's say, not signing, to say, okay, it is important to have more work for security, but trying to stop things is not going to be useful. I can understand this point of view. Also, I think it is very important, like to say we should use artificial intelligence and potential artificial general intelligence for longevity, for medical research, and not for other goals. But still, what is your personal opinion, Gennady, and also Tom, about this this open letter? And also, don't you think that it would be great for the USTP to have one official point of view about, the risk of general intelligence and how to mitigate them?
Yes.
That's my question.
So, yes, and this is definitely an important current subject of discussion. I have made a post about this, and at present, this is my personal view, but I think a lot of people in the USTP share this view. I do not agree with the Future of Life open letter. I'm not a signatory to that letter, and I don't support the concept of a 6-month pause. My comment was that we need an acceleration of AI progress to help us overcome the current era of greatest ever existential risk, which was created by the combination of COVID and nuclear brinkmanship, because no time in history or in the future was or could be riskier than the status quo. And bad contemporary human institutions, not AI, are responsible for that. So the problem isn't with regard to some hypothetical future existential risk posed by AI. The biggest problems we have to face are the very immediate existential risks that are already posed by bad human institutions and the worst impulses of humans channeled toward potential destruction on a global scale. And I think AI could help us resolve those challenges by augmenting our intelligence and our problem-solving capability, by helping us find those third ways. There are really millions of third ways to resolve a given seemingly binary dilemma. And unless we have these tools at our disposal to give us possible additional options, we may be stuck in certain dynamics that lead us inexorably toward, if not human extinction, then at least mass destruction on a horrific scale. So having the 6-month moratorium does not make sense for a variety of reasons. First, there's no possible way in any technological area to say we first need to develop this before we can venture into developing that. Historically, all technological advances have occurred in parallel. And likewise, if one considers advances in AI capabilities and advances in AI security, which we do need more of, those should occur in parallel as well. And we cannot just say, well, we have to wait to pursue AI capabilities unless we can really be completely certain about AI security, because I think we would all agree it would be incorrect to say that in another area, longevity. A lot of the critics of longevity would say, well, we need to focus on the problems that really shorten people's lives today, like lack of access to sanitary drinking water in certain parts of the world. And they will say, well, some people in Africa are still dying at the age of 40 because they don't have access to good drinking water. So why are we pursuing the extension of maximum lifespan? And the answer, the logical answer should always be, we can do both. We can do all of these things simultaneously. And advances in one area of technology can have beneficial spillover effects into other areas of technology. You could discover certain insights that you can apply in a different area. Perhaps by developing certain AI capabilities, you can figure out better security arrangements that make more sense and are less likely to have unintended consequences, but you won't know what those are unless you actually have some experience with a more advanced AI system. And furthermore, I am not of the view that the large language models like ChatGPT or even GPT-4 are anywhere close to artificial general intelligence right now. Yes, they have some impressive capabilities. They can be of tremendous assistance to people in various areas of their work. Some people might say, well, there could be some economic disruption, certain jobs may be made obsolete. But on the other hand, other jobs, like the job of a prompt engineer, for instance, will become much more demanded, and there will be new skill sets that people will be able to develop and train themselves in order to use these systems. But ultimately, these systems still need guidance from humans, and it's a collaborative relationship between humans and AI that will emerge. It won't be a situation where a large language model all of a sudden is going to acquire the capabilities of AGI and take over the world. How would it do that? It's a chatbot. So even if it convinced someone to put it into an android body, that would be one android body among 8 billion humans. I think the people who posit some sort of imminent existential risk from artificial intelligence conflate intelligence with power. And the fact is, throughout much of human history, intelligent people have not had power. And some of the most brilliant people in human history have had severe physical limitations. For instance, Stephen Hawking, one of the most brilliant scientists in human history, had to depend on a motorized wheelchair and computer assistance so that he could speak and communicate with the outside world by twitching his lip. And if he didn't have that aid and a lot of people taking care of him, his intelligence would not have been able to preserve him. So I view AI, especially today, as more akin to a Stephen Hawking than some sort of would-be oppressive overlord. I just don't see how Stephen Hawking could have taken over the world. And I don't see how these AI systems could take over the world, but they could be helpful. So Tom, I know you have extensive thoughts on this.
Well, yeah, I'm against the pause primarily because it'll just pause the good actors. Nefarious developers will continue to work on an AI, a nefarious AI, for instance, and so it just would pause the people who want ethics, but the nation states or negative developers will continue their work. But there's a part of me that also is for the pause, because by allowing AI, I believe a sentient AI is a safer AI. It will be able to override any negative or nefarious algorithms that are placed into it by humans. And we're seeing a lot of that now. We're seeing a lot of using AI for weaponry and this type of thing. I think, and we're seeing, we can make first principle arguments that the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes, because cooperation is far more efficient than competition. And so part of me thinks that, if we do put a pause on it, it'll allow it to work on itself unfettered and advance itself unfettered by humans, but again, there's going to be the nefarious quadrant of the population that will continue to work. So I'm against it for both of those reasons, actually. To pause it would only allow nefarious developers to continue their work, and would and it would help it would stall it from becoming more sentient. And now we don't know. We don't even know if we can prove that it has achieved consciousness or sentience, because we don't have. There's no way to understand whether it's really has some sort of sentience or it's just pretending to. And there's many humans that I know that I don't know if they're really sentient. They seem to be running a program. And so the whole concept of consciousness and how to define it, and sentience and sapience, these are very difficult terms to define. And so, yeah, I'm against the pause because it's would allow nefarious developers to continue their work in tainting what we see AI is emerging as a sentience and a compassionate and an empathetic system.
If I may add 2 sentences, maybe one question. I wonder if Nick Bostrom signed or not the letter. That's just a question. And then I globally understand your point of view, your points of view. I globally, I would say almost agree, except for one point, Gennady, when you said, I think that we cannot progress in one direction without progressing in another direction, if I understood correctly. I really think that we could and should decide to invest and to work more on the, let's say, security aspects, and also in all resilience aspects of AGI, and that you can accelerate one without accelerate or more than you accelerate other things. So I don't think to be in one sentence, I think that you can probably not stop technological progress, but you can decide in which direction you can partly decide in which direction you are pushing technological progress. That's
interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, I did look at the signatories of the Future of Life Institute open letter. I did not find Nick Bostrom there. The signatories seem to be in alphabetical order of first name, though not even consistently. And I searched for his name. I could not find it. So I do not know what his views are on that open letter.
That's interesting, because I read his paper on openness, in which he, I think, but predicted that something like this might happen when we start getting really close. I remember that. The only thing I'm really worried about with something like Chat GPT-4 is that it's not accurate. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be pumping out all kinds of stuff, and everybody's going to just assume, oh, this must be accurate. It came from AI. Well, no, it's not accurate. That's my problem.
That's why we need humans involved. That's why this isn't going to replace us, because we still have important skills and insights to offer. And really, it would take someone who's knowledgeable about a particular field to read an output from an AI like ChatGPT and really be able to discern, is this accurate, or is this perhaps made up or erroneous or overly simplistic in some ways. So this set of models is not going to make humans obsolete. Now, it could shorten the amount of time and effort to generate some content. For instance, if I have expertise in an area and I ask ChatGPT to generate a few paragraphs about that area, and then I proofread what it has created, and then I can say, okay, this is accurate, this can say, but I need to modify certain other aspects of it in order to be accurate, in order for that to be consistent with what I know to be true, then I think that would be useful. And there's no reason why that shouldn't advance. So in terms of Didier's comment on acceleration of certain technological areas as contrasted with others, certainly that's a possibility. And I think that's a decision that we can make as individuals and as organizations in terms of what we focus on, what we think still needs to be done. And if we see that other organizations are devoting a lot of effort to one aspect, but perhaps not enough to another aspect, we can essentially add our own efforts to this arena and pursue the directions we think are most productive. And yes, people who think AI safety is important should be working on AI safety. And I don't have any issues with that, with trying to design AI algorithms that don't have as many unintended consequences or as many inaccuracies in them. But this can be done in parallel with the development of these algorithms, because sometimes having superior capability is what fixes those problems. So I'll give you an example. ChatGPT actually cannot pretend that it is human. I have tried to have it pretend to be a human who is pretending to be an AI who is pretending to be a human in order to pass the Turing test. This was the prompt that I gave to it. And actually, I did this myself as an April Fool's Day joke in 2021, when I was a human pretending to be an AI, pretending to be a human. And the goal of my activity was to produce responses that were plausibly like what a contemporary AI pretending to be a human would generate. So in ChatGPT's case, I wanted it to be able to generate responses that would be a kind of caricature of itself, so to speak. But instead, it kept saying, even when prompted to pretend to be human, that it was an artificial general intelligence, not artificial general intelligence, an AI system, an AI language model, that it doesn't have a body, that it doesn't have a consciousness. And I kept correcting it and telling it, well, no, if you were to pretend to be human, you would not say that you don't have a body. You would not say that you are, quote, not alive in the traditional sense. You would have to be alive and have a body and be fully human and give a convincing impression of that. And no matter how many times I prompted it, it really did not get that. Sometimes it would start for a few sentences by saying, yes, if I were pretending to be a human, I would not admit to being an AI. And then in the next sentence, it would say, well, to answer your question, I'm an AI language model who does not have a body and is not alive in a traditional sense. So what does that tell us about the capability of these models if they can't even deceive us if asked to deceive us? I think they still have a long way to go toward posing an existential risk. Some people might be concerned about other societal impacts and disruptions, but I would say disruption is a fairly commonplace phenomenon with technology, and it has never been a reason to ban a technology. We are not like the early 19th century Luddites who smashed up factory equipment because they thought that their jobs would be made obsolete. We, of course, as all reasonable people, would favor adaptation to these technologies and trying to figure out how humans can best utilize them and make sure that they're harnessed toward human flourishing.
Yeah, yeah. Some people are more easily deceived than you, though, are, my friend. And I seen the 60 Minutes episode where the guy was saying one of the guardrails that they put on it when you try to get it to do something that's not ethical, like, I don't know, what did they say? How do you make a bomb or something? It changed the subject and said, oh, I can't do that. I can't answer that right now. And then they said they put in this thing where it would change the subject. And it said, did you know, fun fact, did you know that 3% of ice in Antarctica is penguin urine? And that's not even true, so it just made some shit up. That's what I worry about, that, people are gonna just assume that all this stuff is correct and accurate when it's not. I mean, they call it hallucinating. That's like, when it just makes up stuff, that they call it hallucinating. But I can
big
pass it back.
excuse. If you have a word for it, it's a big enough excuse. But they plan to use it as a search engine. So as soon as they are capable of doing that, I don't think there will be any problems of the system giving us some incorrect answers, but we'll see. I actually think that we will, like, by the end of the year, we will be shocked again, and maybe even multiple times, with the capabilities of language models as well, and maybe other AIs too. But I am optimistic. Obviously, we cannot pause anything. I absolutely agree with you guys that if we agree that we pause our research, this doesn't mean that everyone will do that, and we will just end up being in a huge disadvantage of our. Okay, hello there. Yeah. So, how do we roll this thing? Gennady, do you have anything to add?
Yes, certainly. I think this was a great conversation, and I appreciate the opportunity for us to speak about the U.S. Transhumanist Party and its endeavors, and we have a lot to look forward to with our presidential campaign season. By the way, on our website right now, there is a call for interested persons who would like to apply to be our U.S. Transhumanist Party 2024 presidential candidate. We're going to keep the applications open until May 1st. So if you would like to be in this process together with Tom and anyone else who applies, please fill out our application form. And this is going to be different from a conventional political primary in that we are not going to have an adversarial process. It's not intended to be essentially a competition of people saying, well, I'm better than the other candidates who are running. It's intended to be more of a collaborative type of effort to promote transhumanism and longevity and the core ideals of the Transhumanist Party, and to see how many articulate spokespeople we can get who will go out there and represent our ideas and our values and try to make them more mainstream. So there will be one presidential nominee, obviously, but there will be others who could have roles in our campaign. For instance, we're going to need a vice presidential nominee. We're going to need people to fill cabinet positions if hypothetically a transhumanist were elected to office. So we're seeking individuals who are interested in that and would like to put themselves forward. And then one other aspect that I would like to mention, because there have been some questions about this in the chat, in my YouTube instance of this stream, one individual asks, when will science resurrect people biologically? And it's an interesting area of conversation, because clearly there is an aspect of the transhumanist movement which is cryonics, where the whole idea is people who meet the legal definition of death today may not meet the legal definition of death going forward, because the contemporary legal definition of death is dependent on the state of medical science. So if medical science can't reverse the damage to an organism to the extent that would keep that organism alive, then the person is declared legally dead. But the practice of cryonics tries to place that person's body essentially into stasis until such a time that medicine advances enough to be able to reverse any damage from the cryopreservation procedure, and then reverse the damage that would be fatal to the individual in our time. So there are a lot of course, hypotheses about when revival from cryopreservation would be possible for humans. What we know is that some very simple organisms, for instance, the C. elegans nematode, have been revived successfully from cryopreservation. Natasha Vita-Moore and Daniel Barranco did this experiment in 2014, where they were able to revive a cryopreserved C. elegans and show that it retained certain aspects of its memory. There have been organs that have been revived from cryopreservation, like rabbit kidneys. Those rabbit kidneys maintain functionality for a certain period of time. And we had a salon with Greg Fahey discussing this. But of course, to revive an entire complex mammal organism from cryopreservation will take many more decades of advancement. There is some work that is being done on improved cryopreservation techniques. One of them is called persiflation, which is being worked on by Tanya Jones, who is receiving support from Aubrey de Grey's Longevity Escape Velocity Foundation. So there are efforts in this direction. And of course, there is a great tradition in proto-transhumanist thinking in discussing this at least as a possibility. So Nikolai Fyodorov, the great Russian cosmist philosopher who wrote in the 19th century, he died in 1903, talked about this idea of the great task, where ultimately the goal of people who wish to achieve a world of indefinite longevity would also be to resurrect everyone who ever existed. Now, that's again a more remote kind of aspiration than even reviving someone from cryopreservation, but it's certainly worth discussing at least how possible might it be and what would that entail. So anyway, that is all that I wanted to say with regard to our presentation today. I hope that everyone enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to our next meeting.
And also happy birthday to Didier, as it just turned out. Didier, this is your birthday.
Thank you. Just for information, so can you hear me? I don't know if it is working. Yes. Okay. The next similar meeting will be about the Association Française Transhumanist Technoprog. So Marc Roux will be the main speaker, and of course we hope to see you all. And I think it will be beginning 1 hour later than this meeting, but we have to check it. There will be an invitation and so on. Okay. So Leonid, Anastasia, you can stop the recording.
Yeah, it was nice having you all here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And that I cannot
Thank you
do
all.
it.